everyone. Thank you for joining 3L and our panelists for Women in Mining webinar. I'll just take a second to introduce each person, starting with Ira Thomas. Ira brings over 25 years of mining industry experience, including 14 with Aber Diamond Corp, now Dominion Diamond, where she advanced from geologist to vice president of exploration and director of the board. She co-founded Stornoway Diamond Corp, serving as CEO and then executive chairman, and led the acquisition of the Renard Diamond Deposit, Quebec's first diamond mine. In 2007, she co-founded Lucara with Lucas Lundin and Catherine McLeod-Seltzer. Ira also served as CEO of Kaminak Gold Corp, which was acquired by Gold Corp for $520 million in 2016. She is currently president, CEO, and director for Lucara Diamond and director of Suncor Energy. Next on our panel is Moira Smith. Dr. Smith, formerly the VP of Exploration and Geoscience for Liberty Gold Corp, is now a semi-retired consultant focusing on the Black Pine Gold Deposit in Idaho. She is a director of Discovery Silver and Galliano Gold. Previously, she was chief geologist for Frontier Gold, advancing the Long Canyon Gold Mine in Nevada. She also managed exploration for Teck on major gold and copper gold projects across the Americas. Dr. Smith holds a PhD in geology from the University of Arizona and is a geologist in British Columbia. She's a past president of the Society of Economic Geologists and a Colin Spence Award recipient. Next, we have Jessie Lou Ernsting. Jessie is an accomplished executive and professional engineer with over 15 years in the natural resource industry. Before joining G Mining Ventures, she led a junior mining company to a 14-time share price increase and raised $33 million during the COVID-19 crisis as VP of Corporate Development and Investor Relations. She previously helped a public company settle a proxy dispute and developed over $4 billion in financing solutions for resource companies across 23 commodities on 6 continents. Jessie began her career with top Canadian engineering firms and has extensive board experience, currently serving as director for the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada. She is passionate about creating shared value from resource wealth. Lastly, we have Patricia Dillon, a distinguished University of Toronto alumni in geology and education, and led the charitable organization Mining Matters since founding it in 1994. Mining Matters provides educational resources about rocks, minerals, metals, and mining. Starting her career as a science educator, she joined Teck in 1979 as an exploration geologist, eventually becoming director in employee communications and engagement during her 32-year tenure. Pat has championed social and environmental responsibility in the mining industry through roles in the Mining Association of Canada and the International Council on Mining and Metals. She served as president of CIM and PDAC and chaired the Mining Industry Human Resource Council. Tricia's contributions earned her recognition as one of the 100 inspirational women in mining in 2014 and induction into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame in 2021. Without further ado, we're going to get started. One of the first topics that we're going to discuss is women in the mining sector based on the percentage versus men. So the percentage of women in the mining sector stood at 14% globally as of mid-2023 and is believed to be lower for C-suite and executive positions. So one way to tackle these numbers is to encourage women to pursue careers in mining early on, in the post-secondary education stage. The first question, and Pat, I'll look to you to start this one off, is how can we encourage young women to study earth sciences, engineering, and other related fields with the aim of joining the mining industry?
Well, it's an excellent question. The challenge that we're faced in Canada is that the importance of rocks, minerals, metals, and mining and their roles in society is only touched on briefly in the elementary school level in the mandated curriculum. And across Canada, curricula are developed provincially and territorially. So there's no one size fits all in terms of developing and distributing resources to help teachers deliver on this curriculum requirement. So at grade 4, you get them a little bit excited. Everybody loves the sparkly bits and rocks and minerals, and they're quite intrigued by the earth processes. But then nothing is essentially available in the education system until the post-secondary level. So how do you build on the interest that maybe you ignited at grade 4 with nothing being available in the secondary school level? So we look to where there might be curriculum connections. And one of the curriculum connections is through career opportunities in the mining sector, technology, robotics, etc. So you try to keep that interest ignited. Then they get to university. But if you're not getting a secondary school credit for taking earth science, you don't know what, and you're not going to look at the opportunities at university. So how do you do it? It's very, very difficult. And one solution is to try and get more curricular connections to earth science in the secondary level. Then, if you're lucky enough to get some young women into mining engineering or geoscience or other paths to a career in our industry, that first job is absolutely critical. They've got to get that first opportunity and see on a day-to-day basis what we have to offer as an industry. So coming from an education background, I very much look, increasing numbers is essential. You have to broaden the pool, and the larger the pool, the more opportunity there will be for women to move up through the organization, through various career paths into the C-suite.
You know, there was one thing that you said there, that that first job is crucial. Getting your foot in the door is crucial. Why do you say that?
Because I think until you actually are exposed to our industry, the complexity, the variety of opportunities, you can't imagine. Our industry hires absolutely every skill and talent out there. It's not just mining engineers and geoscientists. We need environmentalists. We need sustainable development experts. We need robotics. We need the high tech. We need medical professionals. We need health and safety. We need communications, public relations, lawyers, financiers. You know, it's all can be within the mining industry. And once you start working with it, I think people's eyes get opened and the various pathways to success, and there are so many of them, then become clearer.
Thank you, Pat. Moira, did you want to touch on that?
Sure. I agree with everything Pat just said. And I'll say, as an alumni of the US system, it's even worse. I got inspired. My career path was set at age 6 when I went on a road trip. I think kids are really impressionable then, but I didn't get exposed to earth sciences again until I was at university. So any opportunity to expose kids of any age to, geology and earth sciences and mining is a good thing. And I'd love to see the kids running around at PDAC and the Roundup with their hard hats on. The more outreach we can do, the better.
Thank you, Moira. Ira, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, listen, I think it's super critical. I think, Pat really outlined a path, and it does start with the youth. I think it's also important, for the educators themselves. I found when I've gone into schools and given talks that it's the teachers that come away amazed themselves, that had no idea. And so you realize the lack of kind of understanding in society at large to the importance of earth science. And, even for me, I've had an amazing career, but my exposure started at a very young age. I grew up in a mining household. I actually didn't even start in geology. I started with the view of becoming a doctor, and I hated my first year biology, and I defaulted to geology because I knew a bit about it. And then I was much more comfortable making that pivot because I had a family background. If I hadn't have had that, would I have chosen geology? Probably not. So I really, really think that, the work that we're doing, with young people, but also more broadly within society, to explain that, it's the famous saying, and Pat, I don't know if this came out of Mining Matters, but I know you've used it. If it doesn't come out of the garden, it comes out of the ground, and making people aware that the process of extracting, the materials we need involves a whole lot of different disciplines, and so the opportunities are vast, and this is important. So I think we've got to do a better job at every stage, and even the young girls that are choosing science are not necessarily choosing our sciences. So that awareness is super critical.
And Jesse, how did you get started in the mining industry?
Yeah, so I think I'm probably the odd duck on this panel because I didn't obtain a geoscience degree. I'm also not a mining engineer. I actually got trained as an electrical engineer. So, I up until even recently, I still have people asking, how did you find yourself into mining? Like why would an electrical engineer choose to do this? And to Pat's point, the industry requires outsource, right? It's not just an insular finding something and then coming up with a mine plan, but there are so many disciplines of engineering and then other professional practice areas that are required to make this industry work. It's really truly a really diverse ecosystem. So I think I almost ended up working for Molson Canadian, and I could be in the food and beverage, the beer industry, but I think mining ended up being much more fun. And I think some of the attractions that we can maybe use to attract more girls into the industry, it's even if they're not interested in earth sciences or robotics, we can kind of use just generalizing sort of girls liking community building. They like things that are sort of making the world a better place. You ask a lot of little girls, what do you want to do when you grow up? And a lot of them want to be either teachers or doctors because they want to help people, right? And so I think if we expose them to the fact that mining really is a very fundamental industry to building our society and civilization, like Ira was talking about, I think that could be a very attractive aspect. And I know for myself, my daughter is really into travel, and she always is asking to go on trips. So that's another. These kind of not quantifiable and more kind of qualitative aspects of our industry could also be used for attracting young people into the industry.
Thank you. And so that kind of like leads into the next question. Mining is often seen as a traditional industry with sustainability, innovation, and equity challenges. How do we change this perception to attract young females? I think this is kind of what you said and leads into what you also had talked about, Pat, is that there are all sorts of different positions within mining. It's not just being a geologist. There's so many other ways. I'll start with you, Jesse, since we already kind of touched on this. So how do we change the perception to attract young females?
I think, obviously when we talk about perception, a lot of times people think about marketing, sort of, the outward, public domain sort of advertising and marketing of something to attract somebody. But I think nowadays, when we're bombarded with so much of that from everywhere, people get desensitized. And also we start wondering if it's sort of fake news or, can I trust the source? So really, I think the most effective would actually be coming from someone you trust, right? Whether it's your teachers, when Pat's talking about education, or your, friends and family. And I think, another way is maybe some sort of mentorship program where it's, pairing up professionals, even if it's early career professionals, to mentor, students. So people always, I think, trust a message that comes from someone they know much more than something that's just in the public domain being advertised to them.
Ira, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, listen, I agree with Jesse, and making people trust our industry is a huge piece. I think we've got an incredible opportunity in front of us right now with this sort of move to clean energy, and the transformation towards the use of batteries and electrical vehicles, and all of that requires obviously a huge amount of minerals and mined products. And I think that, our industry has always struggled to be thought of as an industry for the future. I remember one politician in Ottawa saying, yeah, mining's okay, but come on, it's a sunset industry. Canada needs to move towards technology. And it's just the ignorance of that statement. And I think with this whole energy transition, it is an incredible opportunity for our industry. Everyone now realizes they need these critical minerals and metals, and the mining industry has to deliver them. So it's an opportunity to really talk about all the good things we do around sustainability, what we do in terms of our social commitments and employment. Like, these are big areas of value that I think, again, people are not completely aware of, or they haven't trusted kind of the accolades that, with the industry running around patting itself on the back doesn't help. You do really need an external source kind of, providing that endorsement of what it is that we're doing. And I think that in the last several years, we've seen so much focus shift towards measuring sustainable performance, measuring your social impacts, and looking hard at governance structures, that there is a lot of independent views out there now with organizations that are monitoring this. And I think that we're in a much better position to point to that. And I think that young women and young men, for that matter, can get really excited about the potential of getting involved in an industry that is going to be part of the energy transitions. I think it's a huge opportunity.
And so in that transition where, technology is changing and everything else has to kind of change with it, how do we encourage young women to join mining when they see that the pace of change is so slow? For example, there is only 14% of women in mining currently right now. So how do we encourage that so that women can say, okay, even though there's only 14%, I still see opportunity? Pat, did you want to touch on
Yeah.
that?
So when you talk about the pace of change, I think there's two aspects to it. First of all, I agree with what was said with the last question. There's no substitute for role models and mentors. That's one thing. But I don't think it's surprising to hear that. Ira, you were very lucky that the fact you came from a mining family ended up being inspirational and supportive to you. But I think going back, a lot of fathers, for example, would want something better for their children, and so we're not necessarily encouraging their children to go into mining. If you grew up in Sudbury, there's a big world out there. Don't limit yourself to mining. So I think we've got to overcome that. In fact, there's been tremendous pace of change within the mining industry, and that's part of the story that we've got to get out there better, certainly with respect to innovation and technology. We are the leading industry in many, you just look at mechanization and the work around sustainability. So I'll go back to what I said earlier. You've just got to get a larger group being exposed to the industry, because I used to be an ambassador for a program called Keep Mining in Canada, or Mining Works for Canada, changed the name through the process. And when people see our industry, if they get to do a mine tour, like a teacher gets to do a mine tour, they see this incredible advancement of the industry. So again, I go back to what I said earlier. Let's get more young people actually seeing for themselves. Yes, they're going to trust what other people say. And yes, all these sustainability measurements are happening. And yes, the stories that are coming out there with respect to community engagement, Indigenous participation, we've made tremendous progress there. We've got a long way to go. There's no question, but it's coming. And the more people get involved, the more and the faster it's going to happen. So I think, again, people seeing our industry, like those politicians, after they had a mine tour, they couldn't believe it. But our politicians change every few years. So you got to keep at it. A new crop of students, a new crop of teachers, universities. It changes every year. So we just got to keep at it on many fronts.
So this kind of leads into, okay, if women aren't thinking about mining, what types of careers are young women really looking for? And that's as a whole. So, is the mining industry able to meet these wants? So, what do they want? And can mining really meet what women are looking for? Moira, I'll start with you here.
I think it's kind of hard to generalize what women are looking for. I can say what I'm looking for. You can say what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So again, and this was very well stated by Pat earlier, it might be better just to stress that, mining isn't just guys with rock picks or underground miners. It's environmental, permitting, legal, compliance, marketing, banking, virtually anything you can think of. Yeah, I think there's a place for almost anyone in mining as long as they want to work hard.
Absolutely. Jesse, did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, again, the young woman in my life is my daughter who's in high school now. And so she probably doesn't want me to be like kind of flaunting what she's talking about in front of all these people. But she wants, adventure. She wants travel. She wants to make a good living. She actually, it's flattering that she wants to emulate, her parents. So to Ira's point about having inspirations within your own family, within your own network, certainly for young women to be surrounded by positive influences is important to them, and then they sort of pick and choose what aspects of those people's careers they want to emulate. So again, I think at the risk of generalizing, a lot of female or just women are looking for things that make the world a better place, and convince them or showcase to them that mining has all these different practice areas that can all contribute to making the world a better place. I think that's certainly going to be attractive to a lot of them.
Thank you, Jesse. Ira, I'll move it to you.
First of all, I 100% agree with everything that's been said already around this. I mean, I look at it maybe a little bit differently in that, I have two daughters, and I think it's super important that they make their choices, and you have to make them aware of the opportunities, which they absolutely are. But I think the best thing about, my career and having dragged them all over the world is that it's opened their eyes to all different aspects of this business, and so they may not choose my path through the geosciences, but I think the experiences that they've had growing up in this industry will definitely factor into the choices that they are going to make, and they are great advocates for the industry. So even if they don't choose this industry, my daughter very proudly wears her JDS mining hat to school. And, in British Columbia, where mining and energy are really considered to be, again, sunset industries or backward. And, and she likes the conversations it provokes, because she's very proud to stand up and say, but did you know? And I think that's awesome. So, I think that's where you've got to build that support and that interest, I think, for what we do, and make sure that if you have a more supportive society at large, then that will encourage more young women to choose this industry. I also think it's super important what's happening kind of at the C-suite and even the board level. And although I'm not an advocate for things like quotas, I think the fact that we now can stand up and say, we know there's 14% women participating in this industry, 10 or 15 years ago, even having an accurate understanding of the participation of women was not there. So at least we're recording this now, and companies, are recognizing that there's huge value in having more women involved in their organizations. And so they are starting to monitor this, and they're starting to report on this. So I think all of that is really helpful in creating some momentum and encouraging companies to really think hard about what they are doing to encourage greater participation of young women in the industry. It's all part of a big effort, I think, and there's no one thing, but all of it has to happen in order to start changing those numbers.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
can I just add one more thing that I wanted to mention during the last question as well, and as well as this one is I think Ira brought up the representation aspect and quota. Like like you, I don't think there should be a hard and fast quota system, but I do think representation matters. So for young women to hear of only 14%, but if they see that those 14% have a place, they not only belong, and a lot of them are in leadership positions, then I think that inspirational effect can be even more amplified, right? To see, okay, well, even though women are still a minority in this industry, but they're making a huge impact, maybe even an outsized impact. I think that can be a really positive inspiration.
Absolutely. According to an S&P Global article on women in mining, there are many material benefits to gender diversity in mining, such as improved safety and business performance. Given these obvious advantages, why do you think a gender gap still exists in mining? And Pat, I'll start with you.
I actually think it is the fact that we're not starting with a large pool.
Yeah.
And until you've got the larger pool to draw from to build your diversity, and not just gender diversity, but diversity across all aspects of diversity. I mean, absolutely, the report is accurate in showing that diversity does result in improved outcomes and all the things that you mentioned. But when you're starting with a small pool to draw from that's got experience and the expertise, I mean, no woman wants to be put in a position or invited to be part of a board just to make a number, right? They want to be recognized for the talent and the experience and the perspective they can bring to the board. And I think it's very important. And I'm sure a lot of women, when they get invited, say, all right, this sounds like a great opportunity, but what is it? What is the aspect of my background and my experience that you think I can bring to the decision-making processes, to the, whatever the board is considering at the time. So I go back to what Jesse said. I love the word showcasing our industry and building that and understanding that also it's not just mining engineers and geologists, right? I mean, you can have somebody from legal and finance, but experience within the industry, or they're all going to make excellent board contributors as well. So unfortunately, I do think it's a case of we've got to build the pool right from education system.
Absolutely. Ira, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to add to that, Pat, because I think when you do have a small pool like we do as well, it's also fragile. You can get great success in certain areas, but for example, I really think female mentorship is super important. Female leadership is super important. And I just to correct Kim, I've actually retired from Lucara and Suncor recently, and I'm now chairing 2 other companies, but my time at Lucara really taught me so much around diversity and inclusiveness. And, when I went into the organization, our participation of women was pretty much the kind of the global average, sitting in that 15% range. But after 5 years, we had 75% women in executive roles, and we had more than 50% female leadership on the board, and we were 30% women at the mine site, which was really extraordinary. And I would always get asked, well, clearly you had a very strong initiative. What did you do to achieve that? How we achieved it was by empowering the female leaders within the organization that we already had, and allowing them to lead, and allowing them to inspire, and allowing them to make good choices. And by the way, the performance of the company during that period went from bottom quartile in terms of productivity and cost and safety to top quartile. Never was more productive at the costs were the lowest in the history of the company. And, from a sustainability point of view and our environmental performance, we came right back up to where we needed to be. And so for me, it was a wow kind of moment to kind of, I mean, it wasn't a moment. It took 5 years to do this, but at the same time, when you make the changes, like, and the company has, they're not been sustained in the last couple of years. So it's super important that you have that leadership at the top, and you're able to sustain it and build on it, because women will make choices. They've got lots of choices. Young women today that are highly educated can move, and they will move if they don't feel that their career kind of interests are being managed well, and that they have a positive trajectory that they can you know build on over many, many years. Then they are going to make a choice to pivot and do something else. So, we have to seize on to these young female leaders, and really encourage and mentor them and support them. Because until we get a big pool that Pat is talking about, we can't afford the attrition, right? We really need to build something that's, much more sustainable in terms of the talent pool around young women and men, for that matter. It's not just young women, but yeah, obviously that's our focus today, and that's a critical piece.
Thank you so much. Yes, Moira.
So, looking at the attrition part of it, and the gender gap, women in geoscience at university level are about 50-50 now. And the big question is, what happens to them after that? And how do we end up with so few in bigger roles down the road? And I do think that there are some real challenges. And one of them is that, let's face it, they're the bearers and the primary raisers of children, and that's a societal thing, and a biological thing, and that can limit travel and mine-site opportunities. And I think that became very acute during COVID-19, because a lot of women ended up quitting their jobs and staying home. And I guess you get around that partly by stressing that there are a lot of roles in mining that don't necessarily require a lot of travel or work on mine sites. Also, I think women can get turned off because they can encounter, bias and discrimination in the workplace, like starting at a lower rank or pay rate than their male peers and then advancing more slowly. And Ira, you touched on that. Also, a recent survey of women in the mining industry in Australia suggested that something like 70% of them have encountered sexual harassment in the workplace in the last 5 years. And let's face it, that can turn a lot of people off. I've always tended to just shrug it off, but that's just me. And we can certainly work on these things. I think that I succeeded mainly because I had the attitude that I can do it at least as well as a dude, and I'm going to kill him with competence. But I think I probably did have to work twice as hard as my male peers to achieve the same thing. I do think that there are a lot of systemic issues in our industry that are getting better maybe, but still need to be addressed.
Thank you.
Moira, just to build on that point about working twice as hard, I think that is a big, big factor. I mean, my 15-year-old says that to me, Mom, I don't know if I want to work as hard as you work. I really don't know. Like, you kill yourself. And when you love what you do, it's not even a consideration. But I do think there is a real element of that. And so we have to make sure that these young women are supported, and that they are getting equal pay for equal work, and that they are not having to do backflips to prove themselves in order to advance to the next level. Like, it's so important that they're we have an industry where women can survive and thrive, not because they go above and beyond, but because they're qualified and capable and good at what they do, and they can find a life work balance. They can have a family. They can do all the other things that are important to them and have a great career in this industry. And I think all of that is possible. But it has to be easier than it has been, and all of these things I think will eventually become easier. But it really is important to have that effort kind of happening at every level within these organizations.
And so, considering both of your personal experiences, do you believe in mining that there is a glass ceiling that exists right now? And maybe, Jesse, I'll start with you.
Just say I agree with everything else everyone else said. That would be much easier. I don't know if it's necessarily a glass ceiling, as in it's so hard and fast, but I do think a lot of the challenges that we've been discussing do contribute to there being somewhat of a ceiling. Like it's indisputable that we're seeing way fewer, there's a lot more attrition through the talent pipeline. We go from 14% of kind of general, or even sort of just less than 50% of, graduates to 14% in the workforce. And then when you look at the executive levels, I can't give you a net number because, to Ira's point, it's not maybe perhaps being measured because it's not a conversation that's really being had that prevalently, because we're still talking about the general workforce in terms of women in mining. But it's I think anecdotally I'm observing way less than 14%. So that to me says there's some sort of a ceiling happening, and I think there's a lot of systemic issues with that, right? So Moira actually shared with the panel ahead of today's call a slide deck, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Moira, but I just love that cartoon, and I think 3L is going to share it after the panel. But there's a cartoon of two geologists, a male and a female, both doing field work. The male geologist, he has to focus on is the rocks, and the female geologist had the rocks and maybe perception, family responsibility. Oh, I gotta work harder. Oh, safety, make sure I don't fall victim to sexual harassment, and all of these things are challenges that she also has to keep at bay, in addition to doing at least equal quality, if not better work than the male geologist to get recognized, right? And even in my career, I've observed that, for instance, when, just think about how in most companies, when you have go through kind of promotions and raises, it's once a year at a predetermined time of year. And if it just so happens that maybe you're on maternity leave because you just had a baby, well, guess what? You're probably missing out on that year's raise for however much long you've worked that year before you had that baby. And then when you come back after taking 12 months off, or nowadays a lot of people are taking 18, and that's great. But when you come back and perhaps that promotion time comes around and you've only been back for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, well, then people are evaluating you on the 2-3 months and going, well, you've only just been back, and so maybe you don't deserve this promotion or raise. And so all of a sudden, when you do the math, you've missed out on 3 years of salary increases and promotions. So, and that's how, one of the reasons how females are kind of falling behind maybe in early to mid careers. And that again, to Moira's slide deck she shared, time value of money in terms of the compounding effect of that money you're missing out on, that never gets made up. And in some cases, that seniority also never gets made up. So there's definitely systemic issues at play, but also in sort of personally, not just me personally, but just kind of in terms of women ourselves, I think a lot of times we're taught to, again, to my earlier point about being team players and community builders, we like to say what we've achieved is as a team, right? So it's like me and my team, we all did this together. Whereas for a lot of men, they tend to maybe not attribute that to as many people in their sphere, right? They are more likely to say, maybe I did this, right? I maybe alone did. So a lot of times that holding back and that, not taking credit for ourselves, I think also somewhat contribute to perhaps credit then not being attributed to women as much either. So it's sort of a external and internal challenge, I think women are facing. So is there a hard and fast glass ceiling? I don't know if it really is. Like there's no one that's going to say, no, in this organization, we're never going to have a woman as the chairperson or as a CEO. I guarantee you there's not a single organization that's going to say that. But unfortunately, we are seeing that play out a little bit.
Moira.
I'm going to play a little bit of the devil's advocate here. I think part of it is demographics. When the baby boom generation, the glut of people entered the mining industry, that was, 30 years ago, 20 or longer. And there just weren't that many women getting into the mining industry. And that's had to work its way through. And there's still people of that generation. I'm at the tail end who are lingering at companies in these major C-suite positions. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of retirements in the next, say, from now to 10 years out, and that will free up more opportunity for women in those roles. I also think that, I hate to generalize, but I think women are more reticent to ask for things like raises or a different job position or something. And I think part of that is incumbent on us to kind of change that and ask for what we think we deserve.
So I'm going to get into the next question. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, which we can address at the end, but I'll just move right into this. So COVID also had a noticeable impact on women in the workforce. According to OECD, mothers of children under age 12 were the group most likely to move from employed to not employed status between Q4 2019 and Q3 2020 on average across OECD countries. I think the impact of COVID is reflected in the stats we see women in mining sector as there has been some regression. How would we get back on track? And Pat, I'll start with you.
I think that's a very difficult question. And I think because getting back on track is going to mean different things for different women, especially going back to some of the comments made earlier, where they are in their sort of family life career. We've got to be welcoming for people back in the workforce, and the work environment has changed a lot. And I also have two daughters, and through COVID, my one daughter, who's got two young children, she's a single mom, had a permanent work from home situation, and that was fantastic. She wasn't commuting, long distances into the city or whatever. But now there's more of this return to the office. And guess what? That flexibility of working from home was hugely valuable at this stage in her career. So I think getting back, I think a lot of employers have to continue to consider a more hybrid situation, work arrangement, than perhaps they did pre-COVID. So I think that is going to be one way to help get the workforce, those women back into the workforce. I also think some of the comments that were made earlier about awareness of the level of sexual harassment and systemic problems within the mining industry. I'm encouraged by the fact that this has been acknowledged in a lot of companies, like openly acknowledged that it goes on, and real meaningful programs and steps have been taken to address these issues. And that wasn't the case, 10 or 15 years ago. And so I take a lot of encouragement from that, in the belief that I do think the work environment is also going to evolve to be more inclusive. So I think a number of these things are going to come together in the next few years. And going back to, yes, there's still few baby boomers lefting around running things, but people love this industry and they're not quick to retire, to leave
Yes.
it. They hold on. I can remember having many conversations with older consultants saying, why are you still bidding on that job to do it yourself? Why aren't you helping a young person be successful in bidding for that job and then mentor them. And for whatever reason, personal circumstances, financial arrangements, people don't want to let go of this industry once we're in it. It's so fantastic, right? So there's so many factors that come into play here that I think you're going to see a really significant evolution. I myself was not the biggest fan of the work from home arrangement, and my young women who work for me at Mining Matters, when they were negotiating at the end of year salary increase, they actually asked for it. They said, that's what we want. We would like the flexibility to have more work from home days. And guess what? You know, COVID showed me that that works and can work well. So there you go. I mean, we're all learning.
Absolutely. And being innovative and being open to change, I think, is the most important thing. Ira, we can move to you.
I think Pat said it very well. I mean, it is a really difficult question. The world is so different in so many ways, post COVID, and so I think there's different challenges today, that we all have to kind of adapt and respond to. But I really think the whole concept of being flexible and open-minded, that is a big learning through COVID. And I think you're going to get more out of your people, more out of your teams, more out of your leaders, if you can have that attitude. And I think there is more of a corporate open mind to how you can work more effectively, and to the benefit of not just your employees, but to the benefit of the whole organization. So I'm hopeful.
I'm going to move on. We have about 5 minutes left. I'll ask one more question and then we'll just get to Q&A. So 8 years ago, BHP announced that they wanted 50% of their workforce to be women by 2025. What do you think of this objective? Are targets or quotas more effective? Unless you set targets, you can't measure progress. Moira, I'll start with you.
Well, BHP, I think they're pretty progressive when it comes to this kind of thing, and that's based on conversations with senior management while I was president of the SEG. I think it's achievable in the head office, maybe, but it's always going to be a struggle in terms of mine sites. I just came from a mine tour in Ghana, and I was really impressed with the number of women that were in office and clerical and hospitality and to some extent geology. But I mean, actual mining is still a man's role there. And I suspect that is the case the world over, particularly in developing countries. So it's going to be a hard struggle to do that. And, I personally have benefited from the push for more women on boards of directors of public companies, as an example. But you have to be really careful. If there's a perception that someone is hired because of their gender or any other thing, they might not get the roles that they want or advance very far because people are going to assume that they were hired for their gender and not for their competence. So I think there's a real fine line there between affirmative action, if you will, and perception.
Thanks, Moira. Ira, I'll move it to you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I really believe in meritocracy. I think it's super important that women are put into these positions because they're the best person for the job. That's the only way they're really going to succeed longer term. But I'm all for targets. We've got to build awareness, and we've got to be thinking about what we're doing with our young female leaders to make sure that they're in a position to bid for that more senior position, or even qualify to be considered as a candidate for a board of director role. And so targets are great at I think driving awareness, and at least making boards and companies accountable to a certain degree. Going to quotas is too far for all the reasons that Moira and Pat talked about earlier. We really want to position our young female leaders for success, and they need to know they're in there because they are the right person for the job.
Absolutely. Pat.
I think one of the ways that companies can do it too is when you're identified as a high potential, high performing employee. Lots of companies offer a wide range of professional development experience throughout the early stages of your career. And I think that young women who may become aware of these programs, but again, because of reticence, because they don't ask, because they're not, a little bit more in your face with your manager, they have got to ask and show interest in taking on some of these harder professional development experiences, because that's what's going to position them, you know for these more senior leadership roles. And Tech had its own internal MBA program, and that was an opportunity for these high performing, high potential employees, and a lot of the young women fall within that category. But sometimes if you don't ask, you don't get. You've got to show that you're interested and you're prepared to put in the work and the effort. And I think that would stand a lot of these young women in good stead, being a little bit more out there and showing, interest and asking for these opportunities.
Yeah, well put. Okay, so I'm just going to move to some Q&A now, and I'll just start with one question from Nazila Bagari, who, is basically asking about what we just talked about. So she says, some large companies and organizations are trying to give the leadership opportunity to women, but still there are a lot of feedback that, in quote, she got promoted just because she is a woman, or she got the job offer just because she is a woman. As a woman engineer who works in mining industry, I'd like to learn from the leaders, how do you react when you get to hear such comments? Moira, did you want to?
I'm laughing.
I saw. Okay,
I would ask them, how many million ounces have you found?
there you go.
I think we can all stand on our track records, the four of us here, and I'm sure there's plenty of women out there who are the same.
I think some
I think
of
women
it
in general don't like to talk about themselves and their accomplishments, and I think it's time that we did.
Absolutely. Ira, you wanted to touch on that?
No, I agree with that. I mean, sometimes it's just noise. I mean, I remember one of my early jobs as a young geologist where I was working in an underground situation, and I was the only female. And it was, I think 60 Quebecois miners who didn't speak any English, and my French wasn't great. And, it was an incredibly intimidating experience to walk into. And there was certainly, I think, a bit of resistance. But I find, in most cases, if you just do your job and you apply what the respect is there. You earn that respect really quickly, and you can change those attitudes fast. And I think that's really what it's about. We're not looking for special treatment. We just want to be considered equal, and we have the qualifications, and we got to be proud of our achievements, as Moira said, and I think we've got to be confident. And the reason that we're there, we're not there because we're ticking a box. We're there because we're the best person for the job, and we're going to show them that. And I think that attitude is super important. And if you have young women that are feeling less secure, then it is up to their managers and leaders to support them through that. But I think a lot of it gets resolved when you just get in and get going.
And with competence.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly. I think really this is kind of a imposter syndrome thing, right? Some of it is you're putting it on yourself that we're falling victim to our own kind of feeling, the imposter syndrome. But as long as, like Ira and Moira said, just have the confidence in yourself, in your ability to do a good job, and know in your own heart that you are not a token. You're not there based on tokenism. You're there because of your ability, and then just do your job, and people will eventually come around and observe that.
And I would agree. My experience was, yeah, there were a lot of people who said, well, she can't do it. But if you go in and you do it, Now, it is true, going back to the very early conversation, you may have to, work a little bit harder than somebody else does to prove yourself. But at the end of the day, most people come around and recognize, a good job and good effort and good outcomes, and will give you credit for it.
Absolutely. So if you keep at it, the score will take care of itself. So I'm going to lead into the next question from an anonymous attendee. When we look at the Mining Hall of Fame winners, there seems to be only a handful of women recognized. Do you think women success are lesser known, or do you think women in mining don't showcase or discuss their wins as much as men?
So, first of all, we don't consider these winners the recipients of this recognition. And as one of them, it's absolutely an accurate observation. There are a couple of criteria that need to be met in order for a nominee to put forward into the Hall of Fame. And one of them currently is an age requirement. It used to be age and retired. But as I said earlier, most people don't retire from this industry. They hang on till the bitter end. So it's 65 degrees at 65 years old. So the thought is, and the discussion has been, that perhaps that could be lowered, but you're not going to lower it just for women. It'll be for men too.
Yeah.
There are more women, and there are lots of names that are out there right now that we know within a couple of years are, nobody's going to be surprised at all to see that they are nominated and inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
The other thing is, traditionally, I mean, the Hall of Fame hasn't been around that long. So when a new institution like that starts, there's a bit of catch up. There were a lot of incredible mining achievements and contributions long before the 1980s when this started, right? So that's another factor as well that's coming into play. So we've got, I think, a lot of things coming in. One of the categories recognizes some of the different talents of women in the field of like mining and society. So it's not all going to be technological stuff or mind building. I think just hold on to your hats. It's going to be fantastic in a few years. But people have to put in quite a bit of effort in order to pull together a nomination. And you've got to think about who's out there going to do that. So, sorry.
Excellent.
I just want to add one. I just want to add one little thing, because I am also on the awards committee on the PDAC. I think the question asker did have that point about, do women maybe not talk about their accomplishments as much. I did touch on this already earlier, but there was one example, Pat, where the Klondike discovery was made by a group, and then the group of men got recognized one year, and then the woman sort of got left out, and then so she was then subsequently recognized later. So there is, I think, there are probably examples like that. So it's really unfair comment to say that maybe that perhaps may have played a role in the past as well. But to Pat's point, it is, we are hopeful that there are going to be more women recognized coming up.
Thank you.
Most of these awards for a whole host of different organizations, also, you have to have an advocate. If somebody has to nominate you and get all the letters and stuff, and if you don't have a social network that will do that for you, you're never going to win that prize.
Thank you. And I'll do one last question here and then we'll wrap it up. Do you feel like being in the mining sector, you had to make more sacrifices than other mothers when it came to your family/children in order to continue to advance your career? And how did you navigate that? Do you have any regrets or advice?
So, as the oldest person here, I would say back in the day, there wasn't the maternity leave and paternity leaves that are now available. So, yeah, after my kids were born, I did not want to be out of the industry for a prolonged period of time, because at that time, my feeling was it would affect my career advancement. Was I taken advantage of? No, but I did not, you know, stay out of the industry for very long. But I'm the oldest here, so I'm going way back to the 80s. I had my kids in the 80s. But did I suffer? No, I don't think so at all. I had a wonderful career, and I had a lot of support. I mean, I traveled on the GO train. Guess what? You got to be on that GO train. You got to get your child up from daycare, or they're charging whatever it is, some ridiculous amount for every 50 minutes you're late. My managers understood that.
I agree. And listen, I think, do you have to work harder? I think you work hard for opportunities that make you want to work hard. I don't think it, when you choose a career, for me at least, which is the path that I'm going to have to, work the least hard at. Like, I don't think it even enters into most people's thinking. They're trying to find something that they find fulfilling and rewarding. Do you have to work hard to be successful in this industry? Absolutely. Do I have any regrets? Zero. And I think that's what happens when you find something that you love to do. And I think that's what you really want to encourage young women to consider this industry, because I think they're going to love it. There's lots of things to love, and you like to work hard.
Thank you so much. So, in wrapping up, I'll ask one last question each panelist. If we were to meet again for Women in Capital Market, for Women in Mining 2025, what milestone or progress would you hope we are celebrating next year?
That's a tough one. And even though I knew this question was coming, I think for me, I can't pick one thing. It's all the little things together. I hope that when we're having this conversation this time next year, we've got some really positive stories to talk about. Maybe we've got another mining hall of fame recipient. Maybe we've gone from 14% to 17% in total participation in the industry. Maybe we've got 3 new female CEOs running mining companies. I think all of these things are important, and I think we have lots to focus on. I think there is I think there is a lot of momentum behind all of the initiatives that we've talked about on this call today, and so I think we've got a line in the sand right now, and hopefully when we come back in a year, we have some positive developments to report.
Absolutely. Thank you. Maura, I can open up to you.
I agree with Ira, and I think it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so I don't see, you know, remarkable changes between now and then. I wouldn't expect them, but some good news stories about women getting promoted into CEO roles or as an exploration geologist, I'd love to see a woman get credited with a discovery of the next new deposit with 5 million ounces or something. The more we see things like that, I think we can build momentum here.
Thank you. Jesse, I'll move it to you.
Yeah, I think I just want to see incremental change. I think 1 year is not gonna, affect a step change in the industry. And since Ira and Moira already talked about kind of more the harder statistics, I'll just talk about like more of the people side of things. So I like to see more male allies who want to also see more women succeed in mining. So maybe perhaps it's more. I like kudos to the guys that are on this call who are listening and are supporting this initiative. And so perhaps it's to see more male attendees at the session. And then the other thing is I think we touched on the importance of mentorship, but then to Maura's point about the Hall of Fame, that someone has to nominate you. So that's then people who are sort of perhaps younger than you or coming up behind you, right? So I think we need to make a network of all at all levels. So to that support network, it's important. So I think my challenge to everyone who's listening is just to maybe make a list of your kind of inner circle and your network, and then next year let's make another list and make sure that it's expanded.
Thank you, Jesse. Pat, we'll end it off with you.
So I totally agree with everything that's been said. Jesse sort of took my idea. I would like to think that as a panel such as this would inspire more young women to get out there and be mentors to other young women. or be part of their network and support them. Women supporting women is absolutely critical. That is a very important thing. So if more young women were prepared to stand up as role models for this industry and for their own careers to other young people, we need, as was mentioned earlier, we need a lot more people in this industry to keep us going. I mean, the mining industry human resources statistics are quite grim about, you know, people going into post-secondary education to support our industry. So more mentorship, I think, would be great. And the more young women who could be out there just talking about our industry in general, and in classrooms and at brownies, and oh no, they're not brownies anymore. They're called something different. Girl guides and groups like that, and help people understand the value of our industry. That would be terrific.
Thank you so much, Pat. Well, we're wrapping it up now, but I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of 3L Capital for your time and your insights. This was a wonderful conversation, and there are a lot of takeaways, and we had some good engagement from some Q&A. So I think that there are a lot of things people can take away from this conversation, and looking forward to hearing some positive stories next year.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.